Hey everybody, Ken Newhouse here, and I want to welcome you to this edition of the Get Clients Now podcast. And with me today, I've got Mr. Brian Ahearn. So Brian, on behalf of myself and the members of the Get Clients Now Nation, I want to welcome you to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me on, Ken. I'm excited.
This is a real opportunity for the listeners, and certainly I feel almost like a kid in a toy store because I've got somebody who, I love ethical, and I like to say that ethical influence and persuasion. I've studied it. I'm certainly not accomplished at it to the level that you are, but being a direct response copywriter and a marketer, I got exposed to Dr. Cialdini's work a long time ago, and you've taken that. Not only are you accredited, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, but you're one of the only, I think, 20 people who are officially accredited through his training program, and you can give me the specifics on that in just a second. But you've also written just a killer book, and I'll take the time now just to say this, guys, as I've started doing with all of my guests, I guess over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Before it was kind of hit and miss depending on the guests, but I've made a policy to only have guests on who have written material that is so impactful, whether it's in the form of a book or a training course, maybe a video training, whatever it is, information that is so impactful that I can put my name behind it and guarantee it. So here's how this works, and you guys know how it works, but I'll just reiterate. Buy Brian's book, use what's in it. You will discover that the book is worth multiples, not only of the money that you spend on the book, and as far as the value you get out of the book, I think the book's underpriced, but I'm sure that's between you and your publisher. But time is important. We can always get more clients. We can always make more money. We can never get more time. So the time you invest in reading this book and studying this is a manual. This is not just a quick read. This is a manual. But the time you invest in this is critically important. It's valuable. You can never get it back. And so when I recommend a book, it's with great respect to your time. And having said that, this is a book that has to be in your library. So buy the book, use it, deploy it. You will make multiples. You will have so much better effect at being persuasive, ethical persuasion again. You'll make more money. You'll just have a lot better time communicating with people more effectively. And Brian, you just mentioned something to me right before we actually started recording, and that is a recognition that was just recently given to you, I think within the past week or two, that is just absolutely amazing. So why don't you share that with us before we actually get started? Because that's a really big deal.
Yeah, I was really excited, Ken, to find out last week that an organization called Book Authority rated my book one of the top 100 influence books of all time. So, to be on a list with Dale Carnegie and Robert Cialdini and Dan Pink and so many other people, it was a real honor. And I'm thrilled that people are enjoying it as much as they are.
Yeah, this is a really in-depth book, and you gave so many examples. And again, guys, this is a book that you're not just going to, there's a time and a place for books to pick up and read, get your entertainment, whatever it is. And I do agree that there is a definite place in reading fiction. It'll make you a better marketer. It'll certainly make you a better copywriter, and it'll make you more empathetic towards people, and it'll make you better at sales, the whole 9 yards. Having said that, this is a book that is one of those books I consider like Dr. Cialdini's books, but also like Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz. This is a book that you keep that I go as it's like a reference manual for me. It's one I can go back to over and over and over again, and I think it's worth its weight in gold. But having said that, I want to ask you the first question, Brian, if you don't mind, that I ask all my guests. Take about a minute or two, give us the backstory of how you got from wherever you were right before you first were exposed to Dr. Cialdini to up to the point where you went through his certification program. You're only 20 people in the world who've gone through this, who's accredited, to where you are now doing the work you're doing now and to writing such a fabulous book that you've written.
Well, I was exposed to his work when a coworker gave a copy of a video where he had presented at Stanford. She gave it to my boss and I and said, I think you guys will really like this. I watched the video, and for me, the light bulb came on, because I was involved in sales training. And so I recognized right away the psychology he's talking about is the underpinning of all selling. I was drawn to the fact that everything he talked about was research-based. I felt like I could get behind that because it was scientifically proven. And then I appreciated his stance on ethics. I like to consider myself to be a moral person, somebody who likes to do the right thing for people. And so those three things really drew me in. It was the ethics part that got me to where I am today, because he was very clear about non-manipulative ways to move people to act But in Stanford's follow-up marketing, they talked about influence, persuasion, and manipulation all in the same package, as if they're all the same thing. And I felt compelled to address that. So I emailed Stanford and basically said, I don't know anybody who wants to be manipulated. I don't know anybody who's looking to become a good manipulator. That one word cannot be helping your sales, but it really could be hurting. I never heard from Stanford, but sometime later my phone rang and it was Robert Cialdini's office, and they were calling to thank me. And they said that because of my email to Stanford, Stanford was changing the marketing of all their materials. And that began my relationship with Dr. Cialdini. Eventually, he was in Columbus, Ohio in the summer of 2004, addressed the insurance agents that represented our company. That's when I started going through some of his training and ultimately went through a certification process and was certified in 2008. And ever since then, I've been doing training on his behalf.
So you're the guy or one of the guys or gals, I guess there's probably both guys and gals in the training program?
Yep.
So when they give me these emails about influence at work and things like that, you're one of the trainers, the quote unquote official trainers that goes around on his behalf.
Yes, there are 20 of us around the world certified to teach what they call the principles of persuasion. That really goes in depth on his book, Influence, Science, and Practice. And then there's only a handful of us who are certified to teach his book, Persuasion. We call that workshop Moment Maker, but there's only 5 or 6 of us that are certified to actually do that. So I'm one of the ones who's got both of those certifications.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's really just making sure. I have to apologize. I keep turning my mic on and muting it on and off. I'm having allergies today, and I'll probably edit this part out. But if you see me keep grabbing my mic, it's because I don't want to keep clearing my throat while I'm on there. So I apologize for that. But I didn't know that, Brian. I did not know that you were accredited in both of those 2 formats. And Persuasion, I read the other book. I've read it many times now. What is it, the 5th edition that's out with Influence? Yes,
and he's working on an updated edition.
Wow, that's amazing. That guy's a maniac when it comes to doing this stuff. But he, that's his passion in life, and he's done a fabulous job with it. And Persuasion was really good. But let's do this. Let's move on to your books, because your book. I think your book covers some areas that Dr. Cialdini doesn't in his. Not to take anything away from him, obviously, but you yourself have done just a tremendous amount of work and service and provided immense value to those of us who want to learn the best methods for ethically persuading our clients, customers, and patients, the marketplace in general. And those are some of the questions that I'm going to have for you in just a minute. But what's one of the things, Brian, if you don't mind if I ask, what's something about you that the marketplace doesn't know that you want them to know?
I don't know that anybody ever really can understand your passion as much as you do, but I would say my goal in everything that I'm doing is to help people enjoy more professional success and personal happiness. And that really ties back to my personal mission statement that I wrote decades ago. And that's what really drives me. I mean, it makes my day when somebody sends me an email and says, hey, I bought your book and I've tried some things. I made a sale, or I got my kid to empty the dishwasher, whatever that is, to know that people took what I created and are using it in a way that's helping them at the office and at home. And again, I talk about that some, but I don't think people really ever fully understand the depth of that when it's your passion.
That's nice. A lot of people make the assumption, I would think, that, hey, this guy's super famous. He's super accomplished. He's really helped me, but I'm not going to bother to send an email because it really wouldn't matter to him. When in fact, it really does matter to get emails from people like that, people you may never meet, but to know that the work you've dedicated yourself to is making a significant impact in the lives of the people that you're trying to help. I think that has to be very rewarding.
And well, I want to say this too, that when somebody emails me or they send me a message on LinkedIn, I will always reply. I think social media should be social. If someone's taken the time to send me something to say, hey, thank you, I owe them a reply, but I enjoy doing that. So it's not really out of obligation. It's because I enjoy engaging with people.
That's nice. That's nice. Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask the proverbial COVID-19 question, and it's the only one that I have, and I don't want to sit here and tell everybody everything's going to be fine and work out wonderfully for them because I don't know that. But for you personally, what's the one big challenge or the biggest challenge from a business perspective that you've had to deal with in the COVID-19 crisis?
The biggest challenge would be that I relish being in front of an audience. I have worked on that skill set of mine for a long, long time. And I think that I'm very good at it and I enjoy it. And a big part of when I stepped out to do this full time was an opportunity to not just share this skill set with people, but also to travel the country and travel the world. My wife and I enjoy doing that. And so that was a big part of what I was hoping to do. And right now that's all on hold. So that part mentally is a little bit of a challenge. And I'm refocusing and I'm doing a lot of Zoom training. I'm sure I'll end up doing some Zoom keynotes and things like that. But it did pull away something that I really saw as integral to the excitement of what I'm doing. So having to deal with that's a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, everybody's got a challenge in one way, shape, or form. Just thankfully, it hasn't decimated my business, and it sounds like it hasn't really hurt you all that much as well. But I know it has a lot of people, and it's just unfortunate that it's happened. But my thoughts and prayers are with all those people, with everyone. In fact, I'm going to read a quote from your book, and I actually have to look off to the right here for just a second. You said in your book, and I just want your response on this. You said influence isn't about leading followers. Influence is about people. And then you gave like a little acronym. It says those powerful everyday opportunities to persuade that are lasting and ethical. Can you talk about that for a few minutes?
Sure. I don't know. I can't remember exactly when it was that I came up with that acronym, but I really understood very early on, influence is all about people. It's about moving people to new actions, new behaviors. If you're in sales, you want them to say yes and buy your product. If you're a leader, you want them to say yes and follow through on the initiatives. Business coaches want people to change their behavior. But the thread through all of this is people and behavior. And at some point, I creatively came up with that acronym that people stood for powerful, everyday opportunities to persuade that were lasting and ethical. And then I expand on that some in the book, but that is like foundational for what I do. And I mention it almost every time I'm in front of a group because it really sets the tone.
So something else that you said that really kind of stuck with me kind of early on in the book is you talk about Einstein's theory of unified principle or unified principle, or however you said that. Let me see here. Yeah, unified theory is what it's called. So Einstein's unified theory and how that relates to the principles of persuasion. They're not exactly the same. So can you expound on that just a bit? Because I really wanted people to understand that.
Well, I think Einstein's fascinating, and I'd read his biography years ago, and like many people have seen lots of things on TV, and he really believed that he was trying to come up with a unified theory that would explain everything in all of creation. And the thought being also that if you really understood that, you could predict everything that would ultimately happen. And I've said that influence, there really isn't a unified theory in the same way that Einstein was looking for it. There's nothing that allows us to 100% of the time with 100% of the people predict their behavior. I don't care if you're Dan Ariely or Robert Cialdini or Daniel Kahneman. You cannot predict how an individual is ultimately going to react. But what we can do based on what we've learned, we can step back and with confidence say, we know if we employ certain communication, that if we use certain psychology, we can move significantly more people to say yes, to do the things that need to be done. So we can't on that individual, but we can on that group. And I really think that that's what I was trying to convey there, that nobody has some model that will predict behavior all the time, but we can with confidence know that if we use certain psychology ethically at the right times, move a lot more people to take the actions that we would like them to.
That's what I wanted you to get to, because of the fact there are so many people, the internet is a hotbed of just propaganda and nonsense as it relates to this particular topic of persuasion, and influence, things like that. And people have their guaranteed methods that are, guaranteed to make everybody purchase or buy or, have mind control over people. Those are things that are really almost offensive, because it's just really at its core, it's taking advantage of people. And just because you can sell something to someone doesn't mean that you should. That's my opinion. Somebody may differ. I think a lot of people differ with that. I know some of the people that I've paid a lot of money over the years as my coaches, very high level people that are very well known within the direct marketing community, would openly disagree with that. But that's where, I guess it's because I'm a Christian. That's where we part ways in those particular decisions. What I want to do now, Brian, is I want to go through, and I mentioned to you earlier, in this particular section, I want to go through some rapid fire bullet points, and I put a slightly different spin on these particular bullet points, these topics, because you've discussed them ad infinitum, not only in your book, but in your other interviews and things like that. And I don't want to just rehash the same old stuff that people can hear elsewhere. So what I want to do is I'm going to ask these different attributes that you've covered in the book, but I want you to describe each one of these attributes and give an example of the right way to use them and the wrong way that you've seen people have tried to use these. And I'm going to limit you to 45 seconds to a minute for each one of these. The first one is reciprocity. Go.
The reciprocity, the obligation we naturally feel to give back when somebody does something for us. The right way to do it is to give because you believe that we're all better off when we do things that genuinely benefit others. The wrong way to do it is to have a give to get mentality. I'm only going to help you so I can pull this lever and get you to do what I want.
Yeah, that helps. That happens a lot, unfortunately. Okay, number 2, liking.
Liking, everybody's going to understand this. It's easier for us to say yes to people that we know and like. The wrong way to do it is to really try to get people to like you. The right way to do it is to really try to come to like other people. So I don't spend my time, Ken, trying to get you to like me. I spend my time trying to come to like you. And the same things that will make you like me will make me like you. But that mindset makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive. People don't really stop to think about that, but it really does work that way. And it's fascinating. Okay, authority.
Authority says that we feel a lot more comfortable when somebody who is an expert, really smart, when they tell us what to do. The mistake sometimes people make is waiting till the end. You know, you've heard this, save the best for last, waiting till the end to let somebody know about their authority. But the problem is they haven't been listening to you the whole time because they didn't know you were an authority. So the right way to go about doing that is to let people know early on what your expertise is. And if you can get somebody to introduce you, that's always more powerful because it doesn't sound like you're bragging.
Yes, and even to take it a step further, if people perceive you to be an authority celebrity, I think you have even more influence with them. I think people give undue influence to authorities, even if they're not really, or not authorities, to celebrities, even if they're really not an authority on a particular subject, but never understood that. Yeah, it's just part of human behavior. Okay, consensus.
Consensus, sometimes known as social proof, says that we feel more comfortable when we know what other people are doing and follow their lead. The wrong way to do it is highlighting how lots of people are doing something that you don't want people to do. So you don't want to talk about how so many people don't vote or too many kids are cheating, because that only encourages other people to not vote or to maybe cheat. You want to focus on what people are doing that's right and highlight the people that are most like the group you're trying to persuade. And that makes it easier for them to say, if people like me are doing this and succeeding, then I can probably do it and succeed too.
Another thing that is totally counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. It's pretty cool. Okay, consistency.
Consistency, sometimes known as commitment and consistency, describes the reality that almost all human beings feel this internal psychological pressure and an external social pressure to be consistent in what they say and what they do. I mean, most of us feel a lot better about ourselves when our words and deeds line up. The mistake people make is they think that when they tell somebody what to do, that they're engaging this principle, and they're not. It's when you ask and somebody says yes back to you that it triggers within them that desire to be consistent in their words and deeds. So I always tell people, stop telling, start asking. You'll engage this principle. It will make it easier for people to do what you'd like.
Okay, 2 more, and then we move on to like regular questions again. Scarcity.
Scarcity, that fear of missing out, drives a tremendous amount of human behavior. When we think something's rare or going away, we just want that thing a whole lot more. The mistake that people make is they feel like, well, I'm going to be perceived as a fear monger, a Debbie Downer, or something like that if I talk about the downside of not acting. But the reality is you can talk about that in a way that's not fear mongering or a downer, but is honestly conveying, hey, here's what happens if you don't make this choice. And science is very clear. Many, many more people will take action when they think they will lose something as opposed to gain.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of those, it's one of those aspects to influence I think that people grossly misuse or attempt to misuse online. As an example, they're selling digital courses, not coaching, because I could see in a coaching program where they have to limit, like I have to limit the number of people so that I give one-on-one my time to these people who are in my coaching groups. But if you're selling a digital product to say, you know, there's only 500 available and then we're going to be sold out. Well, that's fake scarcity. And I think that really damages the whole idea that we're trying to get across, that you can use this ethically without again, manipulating people. Last one is unity.
So unity was mentioned in Cialdini's book, Persuasion. It's kind of a newer principle. And unity describes the reality that it's easier for us to say yes to people who we view as of us. In other words, no matter how much I like you, Ken, I would probably always be more willing to say yes to a relative, because over the course of human history, I mean, that's my genetic pool, right? And so I feel something much deeper with that person. Now, it's not limited just to family relations. My father served in the Marines. I always had a sense from the time I was a boy that when my dad meets another Marine, it almost seems as if he's closer to that person than me, his own flesh and blood, because they've gone through an experience that very few other people have. So the mistake people make is thinking, oh, this is just the principle of liking on steroids. It's not. It's about sharing something so deep and in common that it makes it far easier for you to say yes. And if you can uncover that, it is significantly more powerful than that principle of liking, because it's almost as if that other person is saying yes to themselves.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so as it relates to, Brian, as it relates to being influential and using these strategies to be influential and to be seen as an authority, to have more influence within the community, the marketplace, what's the biggest failure that you've experienced in your business or personally in an attempt to deploy or utilize these strategies? And as an example, maybe you try to use social proof and you got it all wrong or mixed up or whatever. But is there anything that comes to mind where you actually, when you were first learning this stuff, I'm sure now you don't make mistakes like that, but before you did, is there anything that comes to mind where you just dropped the ball? I
think like a lot of people, as you step into something and you begin to learn it and you think right away that you've got a handle on it, you know, it's like driving a car. You think you understand a car until somebody pops the hood and you look at the engine and go, wow, this is pretty complicated. And so it's very easy, I think, for people to hear a simple definition like principle of liking and think that, oh, well, I know how to do that. And the reality is that they don't, because they're always so focused on themselves rather than that other person. And so I think, you know, that may be kind of a nuance, but certainly as I've laid hold of that so much more over the years and become more focused on that other person, and really with the thought of, I want to like the people that I work with as clients, that I worked with when I was in a corporate setting. I really want to like them and focused on that. That was a big aha, because once you do that, if I really come to like you, Ken, it all but takes manipulation out of the equation, because I would never manipulate my friends. And I'm sure you and your listeners would never manipulate their friends.
Absolutely.
And so by focusing on how can I come to like you, and what happens there is you start to sense, wow, Brian really likes me and he cares for me. And that becomes a game changer.
Yeah, I think it does. Okay, so let me ask you this, because we talked about this in our pre-call. You talk about it in the book, and it's just so cool. And until it was broken down for us, most people, including myself, wouldn't really get why this would work. But you talk about yellow sticky notes. So I want you to talk about why utilizing a yellow sticky note as an example. I don't know if this can be deployed in email, but if you're using like a real letter, snail mail, or a postcard or a thank you note or something else, talk to us about the yellow sticky note, the principle, why it can actually increase the response rate to a request that you're making to the person receiving your letter, your correspondence, whatever it might be.
Using something simple like a yellow sticky note at the subconscious level indicates to somebody that you've done a little bit more. And there were 2 independent studies that clearly showed this, that when a request went out for people to take a survey, when it just went out with a cover letter, the response rate went up rather significantly when the person on the cover letter put a little handwritten note. I mean, that indicated this person did a little bit more. But when they used the yellow sticky note, the response rate actually doubled, because it clearly stood out that, here's this yellow sticky note and this person has written this handwritten note on it. And it just engages people in a way where they recognize that you've done something more. And the story that I share in the book was taking that thought process and utilizing it at the company where I used to work. We recovered $700,000 in overpayment to a number of insurance agents within weeks. And it floored the accounting manager, who expected it to be like pulling teeth to get that money back. But we used the yellow sticky note on every one of those letters to say, we've overpaid you. Would you please send us the money back?
So how big was your bonus that you got, or how big was the promotion you got for recovering almost $750,000 that quickly?
I did gain a lot of credibility and notoriety. I can't say that I got a specific bonus out of something like that. But let me be honest about this too, Ken. I never once thought like, wow, I helped the company recover. I should be getting something. I was thrilled at what happened, because that's a story now I've been using for almost 10 years. And because it's true and it was business and people get it, that's where they start going, maybe this could work well for me.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's one of those stories that it just stops you in your tracks. And hopefully hopefully you will listen to that and utilize these things. We're not just discussing them. I tried to cherry pick. Obviously, there is absolutely no way we could cover even just the major topics in the book. There's just too much information in the book. But having said that, I tried to pull out some stuff that I think would really help you and give you an immediate effective tool that you could deploy right now, like as soon as this call's over, as soon as this show is done, you've listened to it, you can deploy this stuff and it works instantly. Is it going to work every time? No, but it's going to work a lot more times, and it's going to help you be much more effective if you don't use it. So I kind of mentioned in the setup of that question, Brian, I said this is more for snail mail because there's no way to send really, you lose the effect if you were to try to do something like this in an email. But having said that, are there any strategies that you could recommend for us to make our email, number one, to help increase or improve our email open rates, and number two, maybe increase the response rate to the requests that we're making within the body or the context of our emails?
The same thought process would apply with a regular email. The more that somebody knows you've put in effort, the more likely they are to respond in a way that you would like them to. And that's probably just, getting back to you. And when you send out an email that is clearly just a form email, people are not going to feel that sense of obligation. They know this came from some server and it just dropped my name in, or worse yet, dear valued customer, indicates that there was nothing really behind that. But when you take a moment to personalize it by putting in somebody's name and you ask a specific question, most people feel somewhat compelled to answer questions. I found those little things like that make a big difference. And if I can personalize it in any way by asking something about themselves that clearly knows Brian knows me, that tends to get an even higher response rate. So really what I'm saying here is the more that you personalize that, the more effort somebody sees that you actually typed out this email and sent it, the more likely they are to respond to it. But I would encourage all of your listeners, try that question, because I've always found this to be really successful. If I've done something for somebody and I put a question right at the end, by itself from that last paragraph, is this what you needed? Is this what you were looking for? Is this what you were hoping for? Something to get them to come back and confirm to me that I've given them what they needed. Usually people don't just say, yes, thank you. If you do your job well, they'll come back with a lot of praise, which is now working on them psychologically to help them see you as that person they want to continue to interact with.
Guys, I hope you're paying attention, because what he just gave you is like a total value bomb. That is amazing information right there. There's so much value in that. I can't even tell you. So let me ask you this, Brian, as far as the stuff you've learned from Dr. Cialdini, the ethical persuasion, all the different models, all the different frameworks, all the different strategies, I guess, of communication, methods of communication, what has really surprised you the most about learning these things as it relates to being able to more effectively communicate and be able to more effectively persuade the people that you want to persuade?
Probably one of the most interesting things that I've learned over that time is how much this works on your psychology that you don't even realize it. I've always had people say things like, that stuff doesn't work on me. I see that coming a mile away, whatever it is that they say, as if they are immune to these things being this psychology. And the more that I've learned about how our minds work, it's somewhere in the 85 to 95% range. You'll see different numbers from different authorities, but anywhere from 85 to 95% of our decision making is driven by our subconscious, which means much of this is bypassing our forward critical thinking, but it's still having an impact. And so for somebody to think, well, that stuff's not going to really work, that's no big deal. It is a big deal. It does have that kind of impact. That's why you start seeing significantly more people moving in the direction that you'd like them to, as you ethically and correctly, bring these principles into your communication, be it verbal or written.
One of the things that I try to tell people often is that all of us innately have this thing built into our DNA called the sales prevention firewall, so that even if you're totally legitimate, which I suspect that you are, even if you've got something that just could totally transform your client or your prospect's life, because of being bombarded online with all of this nonsense that people hear and stuff on TV and everything else, and the fact that we live in a society where unfortunately people will lie through their teeth to get your money, what he's telling you is absolutely correct. Because of the fact that much of our decision-making processes are subconscious, this stuff works. That's why it's important to, and Brian, I told you, one of my guests actually kind of chastised me because I said, this is ethical persuasion, and he didn't like that. Well, yeah, don't use this just because you can use it. Use it for the right reasons, and I think that needs to be said. And I think you would agree with that. You talked also, Brian, in the book, and I apologize if I'm going a little fast, but I know you're on a schedule, and I want to make sure I try to get some of these questions in because I think they'll really help the people listening. You talked about the importance of number one, and I got these out of order, saying thank you to people, but you also talked about the proper ways to respond to people who say thank you. So based on that, you can kind of flip-flop that if you want, but there are right ways to respond to thank yous. And I want to know why. And then I want to know why it's important that we actually say thank you. Because so many people today, especially, I'm not trying to bash on millennials, but it's like, you owe me, dude. Come on. I don't need to say thank you. I'm me. Look at me. I deserve this. That's kind of the mentality that we have to deal with sometimes. But why are those two, answer those or address those 2 points for me on the thank you question?
Well, when it comes to giving thanks, I always think about a story where I had gone out of my way to do something, and I did not have to do this. And I stopped a whole team of people, and we kind of did a stop the presses. We did what we needed to do. We stayed a little bit late. We got this person all the information they were going to need the next day, and they never came back and said, boo, no thank you, nothing. And I remember very clearly thinking, I don't work for thanks. I was paid well to do what I did, but I knew in my heart that if that person wanted me to go above and beyond the next time, I probably wasn't going to. And even if I did, I knew that I wouldn't have the same energy and enthusiasm as I would for that person who genuinely appreciated what happened. So we need to put ourselves in the position of that other person. What happens when we don't say thank you? What's happening? You may not hear something back from them, but it's probably working on their psyche. It can never hurt to really give praise and thanks when it's actually due, but it can sure hurt if you don't do that.
Yeah, that's just one of those things where it was just the way I was brought up. But, I feel it. If somebody doesn't say thank you, it's that's like when my kids were growing up, that was not allowed. You will say thank you whether you want to or not. That's just the right thing to do when somebody does something for you because they don't have to.
Yep. Now, when it goes the other way, though, when somebody thanks you, you need to be ready to respond to that. And it's not acceptable to ignore it. As the person thanks you, you don't say anything, and they're like, gosh, they don't appreciate that I appreciated them. You don't want to dismiss it by saying like, oh, Ken, I would have done it for anybody. That makes you feel real special. People do that all the time where they are very dismissive about it. But there's a lot of things that we can say that would engage somebody and make them feel good about that. So, if it's nothing more than, it was my pleasure to help you. I'm happy that you are happy with the service or the product. But I think we should go above and beyond. And, you have opportunities to say, what, that's what partners do for each other. If you're in some kind of business relationship, yeah. I was happy to help. I like to joke a lot. Sometimes I'll say it would have killed an ordinary person, but you were worth it. And you're laughing and they laugh. And when they're laughing, the endorphins are flowing. Everybody's feeling good.
That's good.
And we are building relationship by doing that. So giving thanks and responding to thanks are really, really important. And yet people too often dismiss it.
Brian, I just want you to know that psychology stuff doesn't work on me. I was laughing at something else, not at your response. No, that was really good. That's really good. Let me ask you this. What about I won't just say the field of persuasion, but learning these strategies, these techniques, what about all this process of becoming more influential, becoming seen as well, you are an authority. What about this process of influence that you've learned from Dr. Cialdini and then your own research has really surprised you the most?
What has surprised me the most?
Or different from, or I'll throw this caveat in there, or different from what you expected or imagined. How's that?
I think, well, you used a word technique, and I try to steer clear of that. And we talk about principles, and because I like to think about living out of principles that you deeply believe. And nobody wants to be techniqued. Nobody wants to know that you learned how to do some technique to get them to do what you want. But I think if you realize that you can live a principle-based life, and these are principles that people typically think and behave by, it's just almost in our genetics. What I would say, I'm probably a little bit surprised is, as I've internalized it, how it's become just a natural part of who I am. Where somebody might sometimes say, "Oh, I see what you did, ha ha," and I'm like, "No, tell me." And they'll, because we've had interaction, they might say, "Well, you engage the principle of reciprocity here, or liking," and I might not have even forward thinking been doing that, but that shows it's such a natural part of who I am that it just comes out. And I think that when people see that, that's where you're really being authentic.
Yeah.
And so the more that you can internalize this, not using it as a lever to just get what you want, but to really deeply internalize it, the more authentic you become. And then it just becomes that much easier to make things happen. But those things are not just good for me, they're good for the other person too. So in the end, we're both better off.
You know, that's really good. And that's one of the reasons I said this is a book, referring to your book. This is not a book to read through to learn a few tactics. And yes, I did use the word. But to internalize this stuff, to ingrain it, it's like riding a bicycle. You don't have to think about riding the bicycle. It's just it becomes part of your neurology. And so, Brian, you bring out an exceptionally good point here, and that is that all the more reason to study Brian's book and not just read through it, because if you can internalize these things, make it part of your neurology, make it part of you, it's just natural. It's a natural course of life for you to engage and deploy these principles because they're part of who you are, and you become a much more effective and persuasive individual by doing that. So let me ask you this, Brian. In the book, you talked about, and gas prices obviously are at record lows, so we have to play around with this just a bit. But in the book, you talked about, or you posed the question, which is better, a $25 gas card or a $25 Visa card? But at the time, gas prices were exorbitant. They were extremely high, but we can't say that now. But still, take that principle and explain, because there's a bigger overarching principle here, and that's what I really want to get to. But use the story and or however you want to, tell that from the book. But the principle is what I'm looking for.
Well, working in the sales and marketing department at the insurance company, we were always trying to motivate agents and especially the customer service reps to do things. And so it was not uncommon to have contests where, if they wrote a certain number of policies, they could get a gas card. And what you clearly find out right away is when it's tied to something that's top of mind, and back then gas prices fluctuating between $3 and $4 a gallon, that was a big deal to think you were saving money on gas. The question that I pose to people in the book is, which is more valuable, the $25 gas card or the $25 gift card? And most people just kind of instinctively at that time defaulted to the gas card. Well, then you'd say, well, wait a minute, but $25 is $25, right? And they're, yeah. And you could spend your Visa card on the gas if you wanted. Yeah. But you could also spend it on anything else. So in a sense, isn't it really more valuable because you have more options with it? And that's where they start looking and going, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Now, even though I understand that, if I were running a promotional contest, I would tie something I would tie the monetary value to something of significance to people, because people tended to work so much harder for those. They worked harder to win the cruise that they could go on rather than the $1,200 in cash that they could have gotten. People will always say that they just want cash because they can do more with it, but they don't tend to work as hard for that. So I really wanted to just raise that awareness that really one is technically more valuable because of its portability. But if you're running a contest, you need to really think about what is going to grab that person's attention and going to have real value, tangible value to them.
Yeah, like right now, you could offer a contest where you're giving a $25 gift card that you could use to buy paper towels or toilet paper, because in some places it's still a challenge to get those things versus a $25 Visa card. I don't know, that's just something that popped into mind. All right, so I really have a lot more questions, but our time is running out. So I have one more question, and then we're going to ask you how we can get in touch with you and buy your book and so on and so forth. But what's the one question, Brian, today that I didn't ask that I should have, that you really wanted me to ask?
People usually ask me the question, which of these principles is most powerful? Yeah, that's a very regular question, and I get it. People want to know can they get the most bang for the buck. When people ask that, my response is always, it depends. It depends on the person you're interacting with, what you're trying to accomplish. If you're looking to build a relationship, there's certain principles that are more effective there. If somebody likes you, but they're not really sure what to do, there's a couple of principles that are more effective there. And if they like you and they know what to do, but they're just not doing it, they're dragging their feet, well, there's a few principles that we can talk about that are most effective there. So that's why I say it depends. But that's the question I probably get more than any other, which is most powerful.
Okay, and so let me ask you this. What's the best way for us to buy your book, Influencing People? Do you want us to go straight to Amazon? You want us to go to your website? And then what's the URL of your website? And then what other links do you have to share for us?
Either place is fine. I mean, if they go to my website and they click on it, it's going to pop them over to Amazon, so they can get to it either way. But it's available. There's plenty of links to it from my website, which is influencepeople.biz. And then on Amazon, it's available in paperback, ebook, and audio.
Anything else that you want to talk about, recommend, or address right now that you want people to grab? Any kind of resource or anything like that?
Well, if they go to my website, I've got a tremendous number of free resources. I've been blogging for more than a decade every single week, so there's just a tremendous amount if people like to read. I've been on a guest on, 60, 70 podcasts, and I always list those podcasts so they could go back and look at any that are most appealing for them. I do work with LinkedIn, so there's previews of the LinkedIn learning courses. So if any of your listeners utilize LinkedIn Learning, I've got courses on persuasive selling, persuasive coaching, persuading different personality styles, building coaching culture. There's a lot of additional information out there.
Yeah, can you send me links to that, to the LinkedIn Learning? Because I know that'll go over well in addition to your book. So you can send me the hard links for that?
Sure.
Okay. Well, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I know you got a coaching call coming up, and I want to just say again, thank you so much. I do appreciate the fact that you've invested your time to be with us today. Again, I respect your time. That's the one thing we can never get more of. So on behalf of myself and the members of the Get Clients Now Nation, I want to just, again, extend my gratitude for you investing the time to be with us today. It's been really awesome. And hopefully somewhere down the road, I can get you to come back.
That would be my pleasure.